Good morning, Ugly Mug Marketing followers and friends. Welcome to another edition of Ugly Mug Marketing Coffee Chats, the live show where we drink coffee and we chat about marketing, leadership, business, all the things, y'all. My name is Hannah Balia, and I am the Director of Communications and Teaching here at Ugly Mug. And today I am joined by Ugly Mug Marketing founder and author of Full Circle Marketing, Wayne Mullins. This year, Ugly Mug Marketing is celebrating 15 years, which is super exciting. And I feel really special that I've gotten to be a part of the last 6 years at Ugly Mug. And I thought, what better way to kick off 2024 than with some entrepreneurial stories and lessons from a seasoned entrepreneur. So Wayne, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Glad to be here.
Yes, excited to dive into all the things. And the first question that I have for you today, I kind of touched on this in the opening here, is we're celebrating 15 years of Ugly Mug this year, and we're gonna have a really fun party. I'm very excited about that. But I'm wondering how you're feeling about coming up on that 15-year anniversary, because it feels like a really big milestone for any business. But I would imagine that it feels especially personal to you as we're approaching 15 years.
It does. I think, to be honest with you, without the milestone or without the quote unquote birthday, it would just be another year of, trying to get better, trying to do things different, trying to reach our vision, to live out our values. But when there's a birthday, especially kind of one of these bigger year birthdays associated with it, it does cause you to pause and reflect. On one hand, I think, man, the 15 years have flown by. On the other hand, some days I think, man, this has been 15 lifetimes, over these 15 years. So.
Yeah. I feel like you saying that reminds me of when they say people take office as the president and they're like, wow, it really just completely, they may have only been in office for 4 years, but it may have felt like 2 terms or maybe 3 terms for them. And so I'd imagine in some ways it feels like that. But what has surprised you over the last 15 years? I'm sure there have been umpteen million lessons that you could share with us, but what are some of the biggest things? Actually, before we dive into that, tell us a little bit about life before Ugly Mug, before you decided to take this leap into entrepreneurship.
Sure. So before this, I had owned the previous company. I'd grown that company, sold that company. And as a result of that process, I'd started doing some marketing consulting for other companies. And that it was a very natural thing. It came out of a lot of conversations with other business owners, friends, colleagues. And they would always ask, how did you grow your previous company? What were you doing? And the answer was, I just approached marketing from a very different perspective. And I actually viewed that company, it was a lawn and landscape company, nothing fancy or special, but I viewed that company actually as a marketing company. Not that we were doing marketing things, selling marketing service, things like that, but I viewed it as the goal of the company, or my mission with the company, was to effectively market that company so that there was no other logical choice for people but to call us. So life before was, marketing was still a passion of mine. My degree is in marketing, and I've always just been fascinated by this idea of what is marketing? How do we convince people? How do we persuade people to take action? And then really just how do we actually build something worthy of remark? I think that's kind of the undertone throughout this business, throughout my previous businesses as well.
Yeah. And I feel like building a company worthy of remark, that's definitely carried over into Ugly Mug Marketing's story now. And so I think that that's really cool that you were thinking about that. And even during a time of building and growing a landscaping and lawn business. And then that also translated into the season that we're in now. And has certainly been a huge part of everything that we do at Ugly Mug Marketing the last 6 years that I've been here, and certainly the years before I was here as well. And so as you've jumped into, made that leap from, okay, I was growing this lawn and landscaping company, and I sold that. I was giving advice. What made you want to really bet on yourself? What really inspired you to want to like actually take that leap? What did that transition from, okay, I've grown this thing, I've sold this thing, now I'm helping other people do the same thing. Like, was there kind of like a pivotal moment where you're like, maybe I could start a marketing agency? Or was it just kind of naturally evolving into the thing that it is today?
It was a combination of both, to be honest with you. So I was doing consulting on the side. When I sold that other company, I didn't know what I was going to do after that. I had no plan of action necessarily moving forward. And it actually came down to kind of a threat by someone. Someone kind of made a threat to me that indirectly threatened my livelihood, like the way I was providing for my family. And I decided that I was then going to pursue it full time and basically prove them wrong in a lot of ways. But it was a culmination of those two things merging together, right? So I was already doing the consulting. I was already passionate about marketing. Mix that into the fact that I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do next. And, those paths kind of came together, I guess. And I think, one of the lessons is that so often we think and we talked a little bit, I think last time about this, but we think we have to know the exact next step. We have to know very clearly and very succinctly what we're going to do, what's our calling or what's our purpose. And for me, that has never been the case. So even more history, I went to a private Christian university. So Louisiana College, now LCU. And a lot of my classmates were there because they felt called to be a preacher or a youth minister or a music director or one of these things. So they felt like they had these big callings in their lives. And I never felt that. And so for me, I always felt like I was trying to figure this thing out. Like, what is my purpose? What am I here for? And I don't know that I've yet arrived at that answer, that explanation. But what I've realized is that my calling, I think, is to help other people become a little bit better each day. And that is whether that's through our team, through my personal relationships, through our client relationships. I really think that for me, may be kind of the calling.
Yeah. I can see that. And it's funny because you wouldn't really think about that being your calling when you're stepping into marketing necessarily. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's kind of just learned over time, probably because the company just started with you and then you made your first hire and then you kind of start diving into more of that leadership role and having to learn those ropes and certainly experiencing challenges and highs and lows with that. Tell us about a time that you had to do something for the very first time, like in this journey. I'm sure there was a lot that you were doing for the very first time, and kind of maybe how you overcame that through the lens of maybe like imposter syndrome or, a time where you were kind of like down and out, unsure about the decisions you were making or about this path or journey. Because one thing that I know is true about entrepreneurship, just from you, is that in those early stages, it can be lonely. And there can be a lot of imposter syndrome happening because it is a lot of doing things for the first time and having to have a lot of grit and figure it out along the way, and being willing to accept the fact that you might fail, right? And then having to get back up on your own or with the help of your family and your friends to keep going along the path. So tell us about a time where you kind of hit a low or hit a challenge and how you overcame that.
There's definitely been a lot of those seasons or lows, as well as a lot of highs as well. I really believe that, with all of life, and business is no different, that there are seasons. I think the big problem with entrepreneurship is that it is so glamorized. And we are led to believe that the path should always be linear and up, right? It should always be going up in the right direction with our businesses and with our careers. And the media, particularly in the business world, really, they don't highlight the people who've struggled for years and made it. They highlight the ones who had this overnight success. They highlight the ones who magically transform something into something amazing. But that is the anomaly. That is not the reality for 99.9% of entrepreneurs. And what I've learned is we go to those stories, we go to those things in the media as entrepreneurs for inspiration. And what I found, for me at least, is they actually become very depressing because, like you said, the imposter syndrome comes up where it's like, what's wrong with me? Like they've transformed this ordinary little thing into this amazing thing. And here I am struggling to make payroll on Friday, or here I am struggling after X years in business and we're still barely breaking even. And I think there's such a, again, glamorization, if that's a word, of entrepreneurship.
It's a word today.
Of entrepreneurship, that it can create and lead to what I would describe as a lot of hopelessness in entrepreneurs. So I believe a fundamental thing for someone who wants to be an entrepreneur is they have a sense of hope that they can create something, hope that they can make an impact, hope that they can make a difference in a set of customers or groups' lives. And what happens is we begin to doubt that. We begin to question that. And hopelessness, in my opinion, is what leads to so many things, not just in entrepreneurship, so many negative things, depression, anxiety, all these things stem from, I believe, hopelessness.
Yeah. And I just saw somebody commented, Lisa said on YouTube, oh man, do I feel this about imposter syndrome. And I think that entrepreneur or not, even everyone struggles with some level of imposter syndrome when you're stepping into a new role, or you're stepping into a new season, or in your personal life or in your professional life as well. Like I just stepped into motherhood this year, or within this past year. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I am absolutely winging it. How does everyone just know what needs to happen? Or how do they know what their calling is, or know that what the next step is? Or I dropped my daughter off at daycare and they're like, Mom, can we try solids this week? And I'm like, are we supposed to be doing that? Have I supposed to have been buying baby food? Like she seems pretty happy still just having a bottle. I don't know what I'm doing. So yes, imposter syndrome is definitely something that can challenge us in this entrepreneurship journey, but also in our personal lives as well, for sure. And so I guess with that, as you've experienced imposter syndrome, or those lows, or maybe that hopeless feeling over time, I guess what helped you overcome those things then, or those times, or those feelings, or those struggles?
For me, it would be a combination of a lot of things. I've publicly shared about this some, kind of my experience with depression at some point during this journey. And that was really a low point for me. And I think contextually what happened, what led up to that, was a lot of hopelessness. It was, I am pouring my heart and soul into this business, into this thing. And no matter what I try, no matter what I do, no matter how good my intentions are, it just wasn't working out. And for me, I hit this very, very low point. I mean, extremely low point. And I wish I could say that there was this, magical thing. I did this one thing, I read this one book, and then everything changed. But the reality is, for me at least, that journey down to that low point was a slow journey, right? It didn't just happen overnight. There wasn't just one event that caused me to end up rock bottom, if you will. And as much as I want to be able to say, like, there's this one magic thing that literally just transformed me from rock bottom to, quote unquote, success, or whatever you want to call that, there wasn't. It was a combination of a lot of little things. And I think the biggest thing for me was the realization that I had to work more on myself than I did on the business. And that in some ways can sound very cliche. It can sound very like, oh, that's, a catchphrase of the day or whatever. But what that specifically meant for me was I had all of these thoughts taking place in my head. I had all of these stories that I was so beholden to. I was holding on to those things so so strongly because they were the story. They were, quote unquote, the reality that I was experiencing. And it wasn't until I began questioning that story and those narratives, which were my reality at the time. It wasn't until I started questioning those things that things begin to shift and change. So that work, the work on me, the work on questioning the stories that I was holding on to so strongly, that is the work I'm talking about, working on me. And that was, there's some very tactical things I did through that. So started meditating. I used an app called Calm, and that particular app really just helped me, gave me a place to track. It gave me a sense of accountability because I'm very much a person who loves creating streaks and not breaking a streak. So Calm today, I'm at like 2,500 days, 25 something days straight without missing a day of meditation. And for me, what I know to be true is this, that meditation is so important and so powerful in the transformation in the right direction. I don't want to break that habit no matter what. I want to hold on to that. So again, that's a small thing where it's working on me, quote unquote, more than I'm working on the business.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so important to be taking care of yourself just throughout the journey too, even in the midst of the highs too. Like you said, 2,500 days. I'm still processing that. I'm like 2,500 days of doing meditation and keeping that streak on the Calm app. Like, I feel like Calm needs to give you some kind of award for that. But like to have really leaned on that during that high time, but to carry that habit throughout the entire journey, I think is really important. Because you can't lead well from an empty cup, right? Like you have to be intentional about taking care of yourself and doing the work so that you can show up to work well and healthy and be there to support your team. And I think we have talked about this in various seasons and with various team members at Ugly Mug, this idea of, okay, your life doesn't stop when you walk into the doors of Ugly Mug or when you clock in the morning, but we do need to be taking care of ourselves in such a way that we can still show up, right? May not be at, 10%, for that day, but hey, I can show up and I can still focus. I can still do my job. I've taken care of myself. I've, maybe just taking care of myself for that day isn't meditating. Maybe it's, hey, I drank 30 ounces of water before. That's a lot of water actually, but I drank 30 ounces of water before I started my day today. Or, I went on a walk, or, I did something intentional to take care of my mental health or of my body so that I can still show up as my best self when I clock into work in the morning and do my best work, show up for my clients, be there for my team members, be there for my family too, and feel like I'm not giving everything when I'm at work and then showing up at the end of the day and having nothing left for my family. So I think meditation or healthy habits like that enable us to navigate those hard seasons. But it might not even be a season. It could just be a hard day too, right? And those happen often. I was just talking to my stepdad, who is an entrepreneur himself, and he's been having his own challenges of, hey, right now it's kind of slow, or hey, we just had he owns a handyman company. Hey, we just had a technician leave, and that really impacts our business when we only have 3 or 4 technicians. We just lost a quarter or a third of people who can go out and remodel bathrooms or install mailboxes or whatever it may be. That has a huge impact on the business. And so, yeah, there are going to be hard days, or maybe it's going to be a season, and that season could be a couple of months, or that season could be a year. It looks very, very different. So holding on to those habits is important. And we talked about habits just last week on our Instagram and Facebook page. So if y'all want to go, we recommended a couple of different books, but Wayne, I don't know if you have any other books just for, I don't want to say like kind of self-help style books, but books for building habits or anything. Do you have any other recommendations? In that post, I think I talked about Atomic Habits, which is just like so viral, I feel like at this point. But another good one that we read was Willpower Doesn't Work. And then I think the other one I posted was Indistractable as well. But any others outside of those that you'd recommend?
Yeah. So one that I would recommend as it relates to kind of this whole idea of the stories we tell ourselves and the paths that we can lead ourselves down, whether that's a negative path or whether that's a positive path. There was a book that I read back when I was in the process of rebuilding and coming up from rock bottom, quote unquote, if you will. And that book is called Loving What Is the name of the book, by Byron Katie. And that book really just forces you to say, first of all, are the stories that I'm telling myself, are they actual reality? Or is it merely my interpretation of what is taking place? And that book was really instrumental in just laying a very basic framework that says, look, I'm going to accept what is, and I'm going to deal with what is. I'm no longer going to argue with it. I'm no longer going to fight against it because it's not going to do any good. I'm just going to accept what is and then move accordingly, adjust my life accordingly to what is. So that's definitely a good book I recommend.
Cool. Love that. So we've talked about maybe some of the not so great times and those really hard times, those low lows, kind of how you navigated that, built yourself back up. Let's talk about some things that you're really proud of that have happened over the last 15 years. And I know it's always uncomfortable for people to talk about their accomplishments or things that they're proud that they've done over a certain period of time. But I really want to challenge you right now to give us some things that you're really proud of over the last 15 years at Ugly Mug.
Sure. I mean, the very first honest answer comes to it's y'all. It's you, it's Hannah, it's Mara, it's Dan, it's the entire team. I mean, the ones I just mentioned, y'all have been here the longest now at this point, but I'm most proud of y'all and y'all's ability to, step into uncomfortable situations and to lead. That to me is worth more than anything. So,
yeah. Well, thanks, Wayne. I think that's really, though, a testament of what you mentioned earlier and what you feel like your calling is to help make people better. And I will say that I will never forget my first, I think it was my first or second week at Ugly Mug. I was driving, y'all, for context, I was driving from Leesville. My husband was in the Army. I was driving from Leesville, Louisiana into Alexandria every morning. It was about an hour-long commute. And I've never been known for being on time. My dad always tells me I'm going to be late for my own funeral. Okay. But I will never forget. I showed up to work that morning and I went to my one-on-one with Wayne, and Wayne was like, hey, so you're supposed to start every day at 7:45. I've noticed that you've been getting to work, like pulling up at 7:46, like 7:50, somewhere in there. And if you need to change the time to 8, just let me know. And I was like, oh, you are really I felt like that was like a very caring way of addressing the fact that I was late. And it made me want to be better. I was like, oh, I never want to have this conversation with you ever again. I will be on time. I kept my 7:45 time. I would, make my tea in the morning and then get in the car and, scurry over to Alexandria. But I really felt like that moment, I'll never forget that, because I was like, I've never had anybody care so much about, me being just a minute late or 5 minutes late or whatever. Usually people brush that off and they're like, no big deal. It's fine. It's just 5 minutes. But pretty soon then 5 minutes turns into 7 minutes, turns into 10 minutes, turns into 15 minutes. And then all of a sudden, that exception becomes the norm, which is something that we talk about a lot at Ugly Mug. And that's something that I've just learned over time of being here that I don't think I would have learned somewhere else, and certainly wasn't learning that at my last job because everybody was showing up late all the time and nobody was holding anyone accountable for that small thing. But I think when you hold people accountable for the small things, it forces them to want to be held accountable for the big things too. And I think everyone on our team would find that to be true. And that's because you set the tone in that way. So not trying to brown nose you, but
No,
but I
no, but
really think that's true. And I do feel like that is your calling and your gift.
well, I just, to go back, I mean, just watching y'all's development over those years. And again, I mentioned y'all specifically, y'all been here the longest. I've had the most time to watch and observe and see the growth. And I think that one, I'm not great at always pointing out the growth, like acknowledging the growth. But the other part of that is I don't think even y'all realize how much growth has occurred over that period of time. And my whole intention is to help y'all form into leaders who can, I would love for y'all to stay here as long as absolutely possible. But if you choose to go somewhere else, that when you go somewhere else, that you will be so noticeably different than everyone else, right? That y'all will completely stand out. And what I will say is that that's one of the most, that's the compliment I get the most from other entrepreneurs. People who have been friends of mine, who become clients, they always come to me and say, how is it that you have hired such amazing people? And so that's a testament to each of you and what y'all bring to the table.
Well, thanks, Wayne.
You're welcome.
My last question here, we've got 4 minutes left. I want to stay on time here. If you could help Wayne 15 years ago, if you could give Wayne, like, about to make that transition into Ugly Mug marketing, into starting your own agency, it could be Wayne 15 years ago, but it could be anyone who might be, I really wanted to have this conversation because I feel like the new year kind of marks seasons of transition for people. And so I feel like there are probably people who at the end of 2023, we're like, all right, 2024 is going to be the year that I jump into this, or, that I take that first step out in faith to pursue my passion or pursue my calling, or to make this leap into being my own boss and taking the plunge into entrepreneurship. So if you could give advice to someone in that season, or to Wayne, 15 years ago, just getting this thing started, what would you say? What advice would you give?
Two things come to mind. The first one is this: there's a huge difference between advice and opinion. And so from my journey, when I started out, I didn't know a lot about this industry. I didn't know a lot about this type of business. And so I had a lot of questions. There were a lot of challenges. There were a lot of opportunities that came up. And so I would turn to people to get their input. And what I didn't realize was that anyone is entitled and able to give you their opinion, right? So I could go to my parents and ask them, and they're going to give me their opinion. Unfortunately, neither of them have ever owned or run a marketing agency. Neither of them have actually ever run a business. So they're not giving me advice based on their experience. They're giving me an opinion. And what I've learned is that the people who are often the closest to us, they want to protect us. They want us to be safe. They want us to be secure. So sometimes the opinions that they give us are actually counterproductive to what we need to be doing. And so for me, what I've learned over the years is that advice comes from one of three people. So number one, someone who's been in the position, the situation that I'm in. Number two, someone who witnessed it firsthand. So maybe they weren't the founder or the CEO, but maybe they were the accountant, or maybe they were the COO, or maybe they were the marketing director. And then the third one is someone who would be a world-class expert. In other words, someone who studied that for a long period of time, and they know what they're talking about. So that's number one, advice versus opinion. There's a big difference. Be clear about what you're getting from someone. And then the other one, I'll just quickly give these, that there are 5 stages that every business goes through, every leader goes through. And I wish I had known this more succinctly sooner. So I'm going to run through them super quick because I know we're out of time. But number one, it's what I call the me stage. And this is where you're learning to trust yourself. This ties into a lot of that imposter syndrome. So in the early days as a new entrepreneur, in the early days as a leader, it's like, can I even trust myself? Can I do this? Am I capable of this? So that's the me stage. You then move into the we stage, which is where you're learning to trust other people. You're learning to build a team. You're learning to organize that team and get that team working together. And then the next stage is what I call the they stage, and that would be the systems and processes. So once you have the team in place, you quickly realize you need systems and processes, or else it's just sheer chaos. So you develop the systems and processes. The problem then becomes, though, you've got people, the we, and you've got these systems and processes, and often those two things don't merge together too well. And that's the fourth stage, which I call the machine. That's getting the we and the they, the people and the systems and processes to work together. That's what I call the machine. And then the last stage is what I would consider creative destruction. That is actually where you have to go in and intentionally break things that once served you well, but that may end up hindering you in where you're trying to get to. So those are the five stages. And I believe it's true for all entrepreneurs. I believe it's true for business. And I believe it's true for people in leadership or management as well.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about the creative destruction, because I feel like we had a conversation about that at one point last year of like, hey, here's where our revenue is right now for the social media department. But in order to get from where we are to here to the goal, it's going to require an entirely different mindset. It's going to require different types of processes. It's going to require different tools or different team members, and that all, the newness of that feels scary, or the unknown of that feels like intimidating. and sometimes I feel like imposter syndrome can maybe creep up in that season too, because it is so much newness and so much unknown. So that just kind of made me think of that, because it might not be that you're at the beginning of your entrepreneurship journey. If you're watching this right now, it might be you're a seasoned entrepreneur, but maybe you're taking this year to really grow. You're making a huge jump in growth. And so it is requiring you to maybe rethink the way that things have been done before, so that you can continue on that growth journey. So awesome. Wow. Great advice, Wayne. Thank you so much for sharing all of the highs, the lows, and everything in between today, giving us a little bit of the truth about entrepreneurship, and that it is a little glamorized sometimes, and that it is very much a journey, and it's not going to be overnight success. You will fail. You will get back up again. I love your point about knowing the difference between advice and opinion. That is so good. And I think that is so applicable in all aspects of life, not just solely entrepreneurship, but definitely in life and in parenthood and all the things as well. So I think that is such a golden nugget. I hope people take a lot away from that. If you are watching this and tuning in live, thank you so much for hanging in there with us for the last 33 minutes and 16 seconds. If you're catching us on the replay, that's awesome too. Drop a comment. Tell us what your favorite part of the show was today. We would love to connect with you that way. That's all I got, y'all. Thank you, Wayne, so much for spending some time with me this morning. And we will catch y'all on the next episode of Coffee Chats, which will be next week, Wednesday. TBD on guest and everything. But y'all, we've got a schedule for the rest of the year, and it's so good. I can't wait to see y'all next week, and keep drinking coffee, talking about marketing, leadership, and everything in between. We'll catch y'all next week.